Hello and welcome to episode 28 of Tom's Hirschsprung's podcast. I have a very, very special one for you today. My guest today is an actor and TV star. You may know him as Danny Harrington in Emmerdale. You may know him as Billy Scanlon in Hotel Portofino. You may know him as Adam in The Pact. But we'll know him today as Louis Healy. Louis, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much, Tom. It's amazing to be here. Thanks so much for having me.
No, not a problem at all. My absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for coming on. Now, we will talk about acting later on, so it won't just be all Hirschsprungs for those tuning in. We will talk about acting, but I'd like to start, if I may, and start right from the beginning. Now, something that not everyone may know about you is you were diagnosed with Hirschsprung's disease, hence why I was very, very keen to get you on the podcast.
Yep.
And I'd like to take you back, obviously, to something you won't have remembered because you were too young at the time, but your mum and parents would have done. I'd like to take you back right to the beginning. So diagnosed with Hirschsprung's, had surgery at around sort of 6 weeks old, give or take.
Yeah.
Just take me to how your parents felt sort of at that time.
So for my parents, my mum at the time was in her early 40s. So in terms of the other parents who were in there with her at the same time, she was one of the older ones. And therefore she was having what she felt was more scans than usual. So of course that was in her head ensuring everything was okay. However, 3 days after I was born, it was apparent that I wasn't feeding. And then on that third day, I threw up a lime green bile, which from a 3-day-old baby is quite alarming. I was in Hope Hospital in Manchester at this point. They then took me to special care, which they ran every test under the sun, including, I believe, lumbar puncture for meningitis, all sorts. They were trying all sorts. And 2 weeks in, I was sent to Alder Hey, where I was diagnosed with Hirschsprung disease. And of course, my parents were completely unaware of what it was, had never heard of it. And at the time, I'm not sure if the figure is still the same, but it was 1 in 5,000 babies had Hirschsprung at the time. And Hirschsprung just, of course, generally is where a part of the bowel doesn't form. But it was a really scary time for both my parents. I have a brother who's 12 years older than me, who didn't have any health complications when he was born, but my mum suffered quite severely with postnatal depression after my brother Matthew was born. So for her, the whole 9 months of my pregnancy was a constant worry that she was going to suffer from that again. And then, lo and behold, I was born and I was seriously ill. So as you can imagine, as any parent would be, she was absolutely terrified. But as I'm sure we'll touch on and talk about more later in the podcast, Alder Hey were absolutely vital, not only in terms of getting me better, but the care that they provide for families and people closely involved with children or anyone who's staying over in a ward at Alder Hey is really second to none. And there was a couple of times throughout the sort of 2.5 years that I had Hirschsprung, sort of until I was about 2. There was a few times where my mum requested that we be taken back to Alder Hey because she just felt so safe and secure there. But yeah, as you can imagine, it was a very scary time for both my parents, and they were very much thrown into the dealings of I suppose what takes place after your newborn is diagnosed with a severe illness. They were there with me every day, and of course they both had careers at the same time. So it was a really challenging time for everyone in the family.
Yeah, and I'm sure something that I've spoken to a lot of people who've had children with Hirschsprungs, and obviously going through that same sort of not quite knowing what's wrong. And as you said, you had issues feeding. It could be this, it could be that, it could be the other, and then diagnosed with something, especially something that's so difficult to spell as
Yeah.
Hirschsprungs
Yeah.
is
You look at it and it's an alarming word to see.
so, and especially
Oh,
something, you can't be diagnosed with something that's easy to spell as well, which is really difficult.
exactly, exactly.
So obviously they have all of those worries going on at that time, and you mentioned and you wanted to talk about just how good Alder Hey were for you and your family, how much they cared for you.
hmm
Any sort of special requests were all answered. Was there anything sort of specific that stood out for your parents at the time?
It was the human to human contact, the relationship she built with the nurses and all of the people working in the hospital on whichever respective ward I was on at any given time. It was, as I said, it was the relationships built between her and as I said, nurses, um, who were who were closely with me at all times. I think that is something that my mum has always spoken so highly of at Alder Hey, is their ability to, um, of course, while making sure that all parents are fully informed of how serious their child's condition is, their ability to calm down the initial worries of a parent. Just they're a very people orientated hospital, and in every sense of the word, and it's a real, you feel very, very safe in Alder Hey when you're there. I went there just a few weeks ago to, I'm sure we'll talk on it, to visit them, one of the new neonatal wards, and it has the feeling of a almost a community center for young people. It's the atmosphere in there is very much not that of your typical hospital. And it really does feel like a place where children go to get better, not to be sick, if that makes
Yeah,
sense.
yeah,
So I know that was as much as, and I'm sure that there are various children's hospitals up and down the United Kingdom that provide excellent care and are brilliant for Hirschsprung specifically. But it was the people at Alder Hey that really um, were there to, they were a shoulder to cry on, and also they were a completely open book. There was never a time, whether it be at the busiest part of the day or 4 a.m. in the morning, if my mum woke up and she was staying in the excuse me, I can't remember the name of the I believe it's the sort of hotel, I guess you could say, that's attached to the hospital where
the sort of
parents find
accommodation bit. Yeah,
exactly the accommodation. You have the ability to walk into the ward and be with your child at their bedside at any given time, whether there's a nurse present or not. Um, I think to to sum to sum it up, it was the people at Alder Hey that were the defining factor in sort of even just not only getting me over the line health wise, but making sure that my parents didn't go completely over the edge you know, when they were, of course, worrying that if their child was going to survive.
yeah. No, definitely. I think that's something you touched on there. That's something that's so important that's probably not mentioned enough. People talk about hospitals and they talk about, I go there, I get better, I leave again. It's so much more than that. It's
100%.
it's 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 a lot of the care and a lot of the attention you receive and the relationships. And I know we'll touch on later, but your mum ran into one of the nurses that looked after you, still remembered her name, still remember what she looked like. And I know from my point of view, with the doctors that looked after me, I still remember their names. I still remember the nurses, the doctors. It's just something that stays with you. And I think that's something that will stay with me for the rest of my life, and I know that's something that will stay with you for the rest of your life.
Without a doubt. It
The
was
people that look after.
100%. I mean, I spent more time with my mum at Alder Hey in the first 18 months of my life than I did anywhere else, at home or wherever it was. So it was almost, I guess, when you look back, essential that parents like my mum in that situation are able to feel comfortable there in every sense of the word, whether it be literally comfortable in the accommodation they provide or comfortable knowing that, you know, as I said, my parents were both juggling very busy careers at the same time. So there was always a period of few days where my dad would return from London and he would come and stay with me at Alder Hey. My mum would go elsewhere, and it was just always, no matter what happened with my health, it was the knowledge that whatever was going on with me was what was best for me if I was in Alder Hey. My parents they very rarely would, but if they had to leave me there for 24 hours, you know, a day and a half, and no one could be there, they know that they could get on the phone every 2 hours. And even if, like I said, if it's 3 a.m., someone will be there ensuring you that everything's okay. And I can't stress enough how important the people who were there at the time, and no doubt the people that are still there now, are to the families of the past and present, because they really were massive for us.
Definitely. Definitely. That must be incredibly comforting as well, just to know that you're in the absolute best hands, the best hands
100%.
possible. Best hands
100%.
possible.
It was truly a blessing for us to have Alder Hey, to be fair, because I'm not sure how my mum would have coped, bless her, if she hadn't have had all the folks there.
Fantastic. And if we just sort of touch on medical wise, you had surgery at 6 weeks,
Yeah.
6 weeks old. Was he diagnosed pretty much from birth? Am I right in saying that?
Yeah, well, I was 3 days old when I was diagnosed. Yeah, so pretty much from birth.
Yeah, it sounds a fairly sort of standard time
Mhm.
in terms of Hirschsprung's. Then surgery at 6 weeks, and then back in at around sort of 20 months or so.
Yeah,
Rushed in for
back
a
in again. Rushed in
back
for
in.
an emergency. Yes, it was just as everyone thought we were kind of getting over the line with it. It was all guns blazing again, and of course the sheer panic that caused. Thankfully, um, everything was able to be, you know, mediated, and I think the initial worry was a lot worse than the actual matter of the fact. I was a lot more seriously ill when I was younger. However, it was definitely alarming after we thought we were over the hill. Again, of course, as you can imagine, my memory of the time is nil. But yeah, went back in for a second surgery. I believe that the scar from my second surgery is across my sort of lower torso is the scar that has remained, and it's actually grown with my as you can imagine, it's the length of sort of hip to hip. But
Yes.
when I was 18 months old, that was this size, and it's sort of the scar has grown with my with my body. It's not an eyesore at all. I actually think it looks quite cool.
Yeah. Yeah. Same with me. It's sort of from hip to hip, the pull through, effectively, I
Yeah, the
believe.
pull exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's something in case anybody who is listening to this who doesn't know about Hirschsprung's disease, it's something that everybody with Hirschsprung's has. It's the pull through operation. Absolutely vital for keeping you alive. And you do end up with a pretty cool scar.
Yeah, you do.
So that's
If
something.
you're wearing the right pair of shorts, it can sometimes look like you've got those really defined V-shaped abs. I obviously don't, but I like to
Oh
pretend.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. Go with it. Wait, make it work for you.
Why not?
Fantastic. So we've kind of touched on the fantastic care you received at Alder Hey,
Yeah.
and all throughout the sort of first sort of couple of years, 2.5 years. So last surgery was in and around sort of the 2 year mark. Just sort of how relieved. I know you've talked a little bit about you were sort of out the woods, then back in the woods again, and then obviously came out the woods again. Just
Yeah.
sort of how relieved were your parents at that time to know that you didn't need any more sort of major surgeries?
Very, very relieved because, of course, once you start getting to that age, 2, 3, 4, that's when you'll starting to become a bit more, you know, conscious as a child. And they were just worried about me having health complications leading into me going into school and whether it would affect, you know, my ability to be a normal if in inverted
Yeah.
commas, kid. There was all sorts of worry about colostomy bags and, how massively affected was my diet going to be for my whole life? Was I going to be able to enjoy a normal life of a teenager, of wanting the odd McDonald's? And, all those sorts of questions started to come up. So when it was finalized that, all things were going smoothly, there was no reason why they would assume I would need to come back. It was very nice for them to sort of, wipe their hands of it and kind of move forward. Because of course, after my initial surgery, the next year of my life, half of that time was spent worrying that something was going to flare up again. And then, as I said, we were just about getting to the point where it seemed things might be all clear. So, of course, very alarming to get called back in. But at that point, my parents were so familiar with, excuse me, with the process in terms of having a child with Hirschsprung's. They were, I don't think they were introduced to that many new faces. It was the same people, the same team, the same part of the hospital. So it was very much like oh, here we go again. But once they were informed that obviously this isn't ideal and I'm going to have another operation, but it was less severe than in terms of what the possible complications could have been. But again, the incredible people at Alder Hey were able to, I guess, ease my parents into the sort of. The second time they went in, it was, at first, I think my mum just naturally couldn't help but be very, very worried, as if something has gone wrong. What's happening? It was a lot more. It felt like a much more of a matter of urgency because we had spent so long ensuring that everything was fine. And it had been such a long process of taking me as a small baby back to Alder Hey and constant checkups. And as I said, we were really starting to feel like we were over the hill. So I think there was an initial freak out from my parents' side. But as I said, we went through the process again. Alder Hey were fantastic. I had the surgery, got all stitched up, and from then on have lived a bowel complication-free life, which was probably unexpected. But whatever work they did on me on that second surgery has worked an absolute treat, because not to get too graphic with you, Tom, but I've never even had as much as a bit of blood in my feces. It's literally been. I had my appendix out when I was 16, but that's completely unrelated. It's been quite remarkable, really.
It's fantastic. That's really, really good to hear. And just on that, and I know this isn't a medical podcast as such, it's more of a personal stories and however, but I do get messages from people who have children who are 6 months, 1 year old, and they're going through a lot of the things that I imagine your mum went through at that
Yeah,
time. And it's just really good to see. And again, everybody's different, and I'll premise that, but it is
definitely.
good to see that, you get to 2.5 and by and large, all clear, all good.
Yeah,
So it is very much possible. Again, I don't take it as medical advice. I'm not a doctor,
of
but
course.
um, it is good to see that you can go through these stages at 1.5, and then get to 2 and all clear. So if you are somebody who's going through that, don't give up hope. It is very, very important. You keep going for your child or children. Um, and there are cases out there like Louis, who's lives a very active, very successful life, all through despite having Hirschsprungs at the start. Um, so just on that point as well. So we sort of moved past the sort of 2.5, and you mentioned sort of
Hmm.
having the what I call the train track
Yeah.
scar across.
Hmm.
Um, and were you aware of Hirschsprungs too much growing up, or was it just kind of, well, that was part of my life when I was younger, and I've kind of moved on as such?
I was definitely aware of Hirschsprung. I was aware from as early as I can remember. I was always aware that I had Hirschsprung when I was born, and of course, just through hearing conversations in my family, and of course, when you're 4 or 5 years old, you don't really understand it. But I was more than aware of the fact that I was unwell when I was a baby. I was aware that that's why I had my scar. I as well had, I was very close with my cousins who were sort of, one of them was 3 years older than another was 5, 6 years older. So um, I was aware very early of, oh, what's this thing on my belly that other people don't have? That was something I remember a moment of asking my cousin Alex, who was probably about 11 at the time, why have you not got where's your scar? And it was off the back of that sort of my mum and auntie very sort of carefully explained to me what it was, and I was just as a kid, just listening to them, but really I was just thinking about where my action man was. I was just like, oh yeah, cool, nice, nice scar, okay, cool, thanks. Um, but once I got to about I guess maybe 8 or 9 years old, I was able to have a more I I mean, for want of a better word, coherent conversation
Yeah.
with my mum about it. And then I think by the time I was 13 or 14, it's since then, so for the last 10 years or so, every few years, my mum and I have done a visit back to Alder Hey. So it's been for the last sort of 10 years, since I was about that age, early teen, I've been much, much more aware of what it is and kind of wanting to be um, wanting to be educated enough on Hirschsprung so therefore I can do things like this podcast and be a voice that's talking about it, because still today, when you talk about Hirschsprung or mention it to someone outside of, let's say, a hospital or someone who hasn't dealt with it immediately through their family or themselves, they go, Hirsch, what? What is that? And especially when people read it, as you said, it's a crazy one to read. So there's still generally not not a massive amount of awareness.
No, that's very true.
Um, yeah, and it was always, I was constantly telling friends and peers in school what it was, and I remember there was small parts of biology where we were studying the bowel, which I was quite excited about because I was able to kind of um, use my knowledge of Hirschsprung and kind of that I'd gained through the years of just going into Alder Hey or having conversations with whoever, that it was something I was a bit more clued up on. So yeah, it's definitely been, as I've gotten older, as most people would probably expect, my knowledge of Hirschsprung has gotten has gotten larger and larger, to the point where now I feel like I sort of, to an extent, have a bit more of a formed idea of it. Sorry, I feel like I'm going off on a bit of a tangent. I
No, no,
can't
no,
remember.
you're absolutely fine. You're absolutely fine. No, no, you're the idea that as you've got older, you've understood more, learned more, and more importantly, I
Definitely,
guess, wanted to talk about it more. And
absolutely.
and from being, so as you said, the last 14 years going to visit the neonatal ward in Alder Hey and going to visit Alder Hey and talk to people about Hirschsprungs,
Hmm.
that can be really, really powerful. Just to know that you're not on your own and that there are people out there who do have it. And I know you're far braver than me on it, because it took me about 30 years to start talking about it. And I thought the best way to do that would be to start a podcast rather than talk to anyone. Um, But no, I think that's fantastic, and I think we come from a similar point in the fact that we're both advocates for positivity around Hirschsprungs, and in the fact that yes, yeah, there are parts of it that aren't very nice, and there's no getting away from that necessarily. But it's not to say, that you can't go and have a fantastic, fulfilling, enjoyable life slash career.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think I would love, and I would absolutely love if people, saw people like ourselves as an example of that. It was just, yeah. As soon as I was informed about the opportunity to do this podcast, it was just absolutely something I was just felt totally compelled to do. And when going back and listening over a few of your podcasts before, just want to express my admiration for you and how much of a brilliant thing generally just you're doing in terms of making this podcast and getting the fantastic guests you've had on so far to talk about their health and their lives, and just like we said, spreading awareness and making sure that people know, you are really not alone, and this is a thing that, as much as a lot of people might not have heard of it, there are just as many people who have and who are dealing with it, whether it be with themselves or with a family member. So it's just wanted to say hats off to you for everything you've done, man.
Well, thank you so much. That's incredibly kind, and obviously it's not just me. I couldn't do this without my guests. I'm
Of course.
I'm
And I
useless on
had
my
to
own.
be, absolutely.
I tried I tried to do one episode on my own. It felt like I was talking about 4 hours. It was only 10 minutes. So I
There
need
you
guests to
go.
survive. Absolutely need guests. So no, but thank you so much. That means an awful lot. I want to talk as well, just very briefly, go back to Alder Hey and the neonatal ward. You visited the neonatal ward about a month ago, give or
Yeah,
take,
yeah,
to watch the progression of a new neonatal ward. And well,
yes.
you and your mum went back.
Mhm.
How was that?
It was absolutely incredible. I mean, you'll have to bear with me on this because my technical vocabulary in terms of being able to talk about what they were actually doing in there is probably going to be very limited. But the advancements they have made across everything, into, I mean, what they're doing at Alder Hey, not just in the neonatal ward, but we also were able to have a look inside what they call the Bat Cave, which is a large part of the hospital which they are using to do research on things like AI and how that they're already using virtual reality surgery to train surgeons, that they are operating in VR and then practicing and then going and doing this operation. And they already used that system. So there was a girl with, I saw a real life model of it. She had one of the worst spinal tumors that the hospital had ever seen. And when they first scanned it, it was deemed that this poor child was going to have to just live with it. The tumor was way too big. It was wrapped around the entire bottom of her spine. And what they were able to do at Alder Hey is, over the course of a few months, a group of surgeons were able to go into what they call the Bat Cave. There will be an official name for it, but that's what it was referred to me, so I apologize. They were able to take a team of surgeons into that facility and strap them all on with virtual reality headgear. And over the course of a few months, they operated on the tumor on that child's spine in, obviously, a VR. So they were practicing, and they did the surgery over and over and over and over and over again, to the point where they felt confident of being able to do it. And after being told that she would have to live with that tumor, that child now has less than 1% of the tumor still remaining on her spine. So through something like virtual reality, they were able to completely change someone's life, even post some kind of diagnosis. They didn't think they were going to be able to help her. And that is just one example of the incredible advancements that they are making in terms of using our new technologies. So being able to, and as you could imagine, of course, they are using similar things to advance their care for bowel-related conditions. So things like Hirschsprung. It was incredible, incredible to see, and so, especially with regards to all of the kind of, I guess, press that the healthcare system in the UK has received over the past, I don't know, 4 years, to go into a hospital and for not only for the atmosphere to be so positive, but for all of the work they are doing to be so positive and so forward thinking. It was just really, really, really inspiring to see, and it's a good thing for people to remember. As much as there is a lot of rubbish happening in terms of the NHS and how they're being treated generally, there is still so much brilliant work being done by our National Health Service, and they've just been absolutely swamped since the dreaded word coming up, but since COVID.
Yeah.
It's really changed the face of how a lot of these hospitals can even try and operate. So being able to go into Alder Hey and see that they are moving forward so much in so many ways was, as I said, really inspiring. And that's just me talking on what I saw in terms of, the technology and the equipment that they're using. I've not even talked about how kind of, I guess the only word I can think to describe it was the new neonatal ward. It was a really lovely environment. It was kind of beautiful. It was so not what you think of when you imagine a hospital ward, and it often feels when you go into a hospital that not much in terms of how a ward may be designed is done through the guise of the mental well-being of the patients. They're never usually the nicest places to be. At Alder Hey, it's the complete opposite. I found myself, certainly in the neonatal ward anyway, kind of wanting to hang out there. You walk through the hospital and they've got gorgeous sort of gardens, and it was quite a rare, very sunny day in Liverpool, so maybe that helped boost the vibe a little bit. No, I'm kidding. But yes, I just, as I said before, it really had the atmosphere of a community center, rather than, it was bustling, and there was, just around the large welcome area, it was just not your usual scene from a children's hospital. It was happy families scattered and, obviously safely, but children sort of playing and milling around, and, food stands and places for parents to come and get lovely food and drink. And just the atmosphere that they have created there is one that I believe every children's hospital in the world, if they can, should take a leaf out of Alder Hey's book, because, as I said, the atmosphere of a hospital can often be it can make or break some families. As I said before, I know for a fact that it was the positivity and the warmth that my mum received from the nurses at Alder Hey that stopped her just absolutely going over the edge with worry about her child. And I can't stress enough how much that has kind of, that is in the DNA of Alder Hey, because it seeps throughout the entire hospital, and there's just an overbearing feeling of positivity and this is getting better rather than the opposite. And I was just it was a number of years since I'd last been back, and it was my first time since I'd been since I was about 18, and I'm 23 now, so obviously I'm a bit more grown up. And I just thought it was so inspiring.
Yeah. No, that's lovely. That's really, really lovely to hear because I know when people mention the word hospital, they automatically have that sort of feeling in their head and they think they know what a hospital looks like and it's doom and gloom and whatever. But it is so, so lovely to hear that when you went back that everything was just so positive and people were, you know, a community feel. I think you put it perfectly when you said, you know, people are there and yeah, okay, they might be going through all sorts of things, but the fact that they're so positive
Exactly.
is
You
so,
really
so
wouldn't
good to hear.
know. You wouldn't know. That was the thing that I was thinking to myself when I was looking around. There was a point where we were stood on we were in a corridor that was overlooking the main welcome area, and it was tons of families with kids of all ages, all interacting or playing or just relaxing. And I thought to myself, most, if not all of these families are probably going through something really horrible right now. Yet this hospital has created a space for them where they can be in the hospital and still forget about all of that.
Yeah.
And it's just incredible, really. It really
Yeah.
is.
No, I'm so glad you brought that story up, because that's so fantastic to hear. And there will be many people who've contacted me, many people probably listening to this podcast right now, who are going through things like that, or about to go into hospital, or are currently in hospital, and that is so so heartwarming to hear. So thank you so so much for that. And just to touch on Alder Hey as well, I know your mum's a patron of
Yes.
Alder Hey as well.
Mhm.
What does that kind of entail?
Um, it entails, well, we like to visit regularly. We are always in the know in terms of any major changes that are happening at Alder Hey. If there is ever um, any kind of, I'm not sure if event is the right word, but I think Mom has been incredibly proud to be a patron for Alder Hey ever since. They were so vital in the early years of my life. And to be perfectly honest, um, I probably can't answer that as well as she would have liked me to when she definitely listens to this. Um, but I can tell you one thing that it entails. So she's a patron of the Abilities in Me charity. And they release children's books. Often the book will be about a certain condition or illness. And one of their recent books by Gemma Keir, sorry, I'm just reading off my phone here as well. So I am just
It's
so
cool. It's not video. We can fudge that out. It's fine.
okay, great. So Abilities in Me, yeah, their latest book by Gemma Keir is about Hirschsprung disease. Now, there's a series of these they're called The Abilities in Me, and as I said, it's a series of children's books. I'm not sure if they are all by Gemma Keir, but I know this one definitely is. And they are books aimed at children, probably of just getting to reading age, if not younger, with illustrations as well, that sort of, in a way that's a lot more easy to understand for a child, talks through whatever the condition is that specific book is about. Now, I know you said it's not video, but I'll just show it to you anyway. You see
Yes,
there,
Gemma Keir, spelled Keir for anybody who wants to pick up the
Keir.
book.
Yeah, that's the Abilities in Me, and this is the Hirschsprung disease um, version. I'm just looking through. thing I had
That
written
sounds like a
down.
fantastic initiative. Really does sound like a
Absolutely,
tremendous.
absolutely brilliant. And that is something that I wish I actually had a physical copy of it now, because I know that somewhere I've we had a couple of them. I remember looking through them about a year ago. Um, but to touch on what that entails for my mum, I guess being a voice who's always prepared and willing to talk about her sprung. Um, Someone who she is always incredibly keen to go down to Alder Hey at any given opportunity. We would probably go more if they would let us. And I guess just being a general person in the public eye who, as I said, is, well, she's experienced it herself through her child. So I know that my mum does receive the occasional Instagram direct message from someone whose child has just been diagnosed with Hirschsprung, and hopefully off the back of this podcast, maybe. By the way, for anyone who doesn't know, my mum is Denise Welch,
Yes.
TV presenter and actress. So it's, I think, being a patron for Alder Hey, it was almost just, it was almost an innate thing, because they'd been so vital for us and so crucial that as soon as they ever asked my mum or dad, or now in the last few years myself, to go down and attend, or post something or share something, it's been, and as I said, we've been absolutely compelled because of our admiration for Alder Hey. Again, there is almost definitely a lot more that being the Alder Hey patron entails that my mum would be able to tell you.
Yeah.
She'd probably be able to give you a 45-minute long answer, knowing her.
Well, she's welcome
But
for her own podcast episode if she's ever available.
oh well, I'm sure she'd absolutely love it, Tom, especially after listening to this. I mean, she near enough did a mini podcast to me when I just asked her to help me with the first initial couple of questions. A lot of the info I've been relaying back to you today has come from her. So, Mom, I know you're listening. Thank you very, very much.
Awesome. Oh, that's fantastic. And what a lovely tribute to Alder Hey as well. And just as we sort of wind towards the sort of back third of the podcast, I'd love to switch gears, if I may, and talk about your acting career, because obviously you are an actor. You come from, as we've mentioned, your mum is Denise Welch, your dad is Tim Healy, and your brother Matty is in the band
Yeah.
1975. So you do come from a very famous family lineage in show business. And I'd like to, if I may, just start by asking you, was acting always the plan?
Well, I'm not sure if at 12 years old you have many plans,
True.
other than going out playing footy in the park. But I think for me, it was, as everyone is, whatever your parents do, it's the thing that you are exposed to the most as a kid. So some of my earliest memories are at 2005. My dad was in the original West End cast of Billy Elliot. So I spent 4 or 5 months in London going and watching him on stage every night. By the time I was old enough to be aware what TV was and that it wasn't real life, it was clear that my parents, were actors. It was just, as so often is the case, a lot of the time, kids follow in the footsteps of their parents, whether it's directly into a family business or whether you become a dentist because your dad was a dentist. I think that is ultimately what took place. I'm not sure. I wouldn't say it was always a plan. I think I started getting into it in school when I was probably 8 or 9. Started to do the odd nativity, and then I think we did the Lion King in my end of primary school play. And then my interest in that sort of sparked me wanting to start going to, maybe it was like local musical theatre companies Amdram societies. I went to something called Tempo, which was a sort of, as I said, an amateur dramatics and musical theatre company. I then moved to high school when I was 11 and started getting more involved with musical theatre there. And when I was about 12, it was suggested to me and my parents through one of the weekend music and acting classes I was going to, that I auditioned for a Manchester-based acting agency called Lane Management, who represent a lot of the kids who are in the odd episode of Coronation Street or, things like that. So it was when I was about 12, I got my first agent, which then led to me auditioning for the Full Monty on the West End for the character of Nathan, of course, not one of the blokes.
No, no.
That would have been questionable at 12.
Yeah, very.
But then from then, I mean, that was one of the first professional auditions I ever went to, and that sort of snowballed into me starting in the industry again. There was such a lack of a plan that I guess it's hard for me to remember all the pieces clearly going back, but it was very much a natural progression of me enjoying it as a kid. When I was really young, teachers would often say I had a wild imagination, and I was constantly there was always a sort of narrative to as is with all kids, but there was always a story to the toys I was playing with, or if I was playing football, I was always pretending to be whatever my favorite Newcastle player, or I was an imaginative, quite hyperactive, very performative child. Every night after my dad came off stage from Billy Elliot, to his delight, I would then sit him down for 2 hours and sing all of the songs to him after he'd just done them himself, 8 shows a week. So thanks, Dad, for putting up with that. I would put on a little hard hat and a high-vis vest, and I would do all the choreography. And it was very clear from a young age, certainly to my parents, who of course were both well established in the industry by that time, that I was a performer. That's what they thought. My dad had seen the negative side of what can happen to kids who get into the industry too young, though. Often, when it becomes a job for these young actors, before it truly they're old enough for it to become their passion, is so often the case of what happens when kids will start off really young, and then by the time they're 16, they're bored. They don't want to do it. And that, to an extent, happened to me a little bit because I was started so young. It was definitely a job for me before it was my full passion. Because I mean, what can you be fully passionate about at 13 years old?
Yeah.
But it was always, from the age of about 7 years old, I think my parents would be in agreement that there wasn't many other lines of work that I was probably going to go down.
True. I'll pick up on one thing you said. You're a Newcastle fan.
Yes, big.
So you might see in the background, I have a picture of St James's Park and
Newcastle
yes, you do. Shirts, because I am also a Newcastle fan. So you support the right team.
Oh, no way! I'm just noticing that now. I can't believe I didn't see all those two shirts. You're lucky that I didn't. You're lucky that I didn't, because I would have been too giddy. So
Newcastle down the years.
Oh my goodness! Well, if we weren't best friends already, we are now.
We certainly are.
I
love a Newcastle
connection. Where's the Newcastle connection for you?
For me, from the age of 4, Alan Shearer, when he moved from Blackburn to Newcastle for a world record fee, and have been ever since. So yeah, no, we have that, if nothing else. We have that and Hirschsprung, if nothing else.
What a revelation! God,
yes.
No wonder I took these off. So no wonder I didn't notice the shirts behind you.
Yeah, No, it's all
Well,
there.
after many a year of pain, finally we're having some good times, eh?
Well, we'll see. We'll see. We'll
Yeah,
see
we
if
will see.
it's get stung by FFP. But anyway, we're digressing.
Yes,
Um,
let's stay on track. Stay on track.
and I'm well aware we're running short of time. So I did want to ask as well, acting wise, because you have played a variety of characters,
Mhm.
from sort of people like Billy Scanlon, who's quite a nice chap, but gets sort of lost in
Yeah.
sort of the wrong crowd, and people like Danny Harrington, who's not a very nice chap.
Yes.
Um, I just wanted to ask, 'cause it's something I tend to ask actors a lot. Do you prefer good guy or bad guy, or does it matter?
I mean, I I'm not sure if I have a preference. The thing is, it's quite often in my experience, I would say it can probably be a bit easier, surprisingly, to play a bad guy because a lot of those characters, they the reason someone like Danny Harrington ends up being the way he is usually because, of course, unless you're playing a sort of sadistic, very calculated, I don't know, psychopath, a lot of the time, if you're playing someone like Danny who's just a bully, they don't tend to have that much going on up there. They're not usually the most complex people. They're usually, especially if it's a teenage boy, insecure, fed up about something else in their life, and that comes out as them being an antagonistic, sort of abrasive, I'm going to be the macho man. And it's not that hard to, well, for an actor anyway, to kind of get to those places to 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 get the right performance. I mean, almost everyone's had an interaction with someone like that throughout their life, whether it be in school or whether it be in work or whether it just be in a supermarket queue. Everyone's come across a sort of bullyish character. So I think in terms of finding little, I don't know, the nuances of it, it's definitely, in my opinion, easier to play a quote unquote baddie as opposed to someone who's a quote unquote goodie because there's often there's just there can be I often find there's a bit more I have to try and figure out behind the character if it's someone who's really good. And also I don't know. It's a difficult question. It's a difficult question to answer because of course as well every role can throw a multitude of different things at you. And in the context of Emmerdale, for example, Danny was a pretty easy character to get your head around. He's doesn't have a nice life at home and therefore is a bully and has turned to sort of selling drugs. One of those ashamed of nothing, offended by everything sort of people. Whereas Billy Scanlon, for example, especially in the first couple of seasons, was such a just, sweet young lad who doesn't say much else than yes, ma'am, no, ma'am. Finding moments to make Billy still an interesting character was actually quite hard because when the script is really giving Billy nothing, you've got to sort of pick your moments. Whereas with Danny, it's like, oh, here he is, being really mean to the poor girl who fancies him. It's based on the script as well, I suppose.
Yeah.
Sorry, I hope
No,
that was a long-winded answer.
that's a cracking insight. Yeah, that's a cracking insight into acting. With me, I have no experience of acting at all, and knowing the ins and the outs, or just a little bit you provided there, is absolutely fantastic. Thank you so much for that. And I guess as we wind towards the end, my final question to you really is that season 3 of Hotel Portofino has just been announced.
Mhm.
Um, and apart from that, I guess without giving any spoilers, because I don't want acting companies to sue me.
Of
Um,
course.
but what does the future hold for Louis Healy?
Well, I wish I knew exactly what the future held for me, Tom. It's especially with the point I'm at now in my career, it's touch and go. I'm auditioning as often as I can. I have to say, since after COVID, there was, as you might have been aware of, there was industry-wide strikes that started off with the writers in America. Um, that was, to use an analogy, I mean, that was a pretty big gut punch to the industry. And it almost feels like we're still recovering from it a little bit, you know. The industry's still winded, and there is even still a backlog of projects that were meant to take place in 2021, but because of what happened with the world, were massively pushed back. I am currently in the process, currently in the final rounds of auditions for a very exciting high-profile play on the West End. I can't name any names because of confidentiality, but you might be able to work out what that is. It's one of the larger productions going on the West End at the moment, and it's affiliated to something, a TV show that lots and lots and lots of people know about and have seen. So I'm pretty sure I can't get in trouble for saying that much. Other than that, Hotel Portofino season 3 is coming out soon. We are just waiting to get the go ahead for season 4. That has been an absolutely beautiful job for me. I mean, we get to film in Croatia for 3 months, which is like, I mean, come on. It's hard,
Yeah.
it's hard to even call it a gig, to be honest. When your days off are spent by a pool, you think, God, what did I do? What did I do to deserve this?
Worked
But
hard.
well, yeah, I guess. Yeah, I guess so. But in terms of things directly in the pipeline that I'm allowed to merely mention, unfortunately, there is zilch right now. But that doesn't mean there is zilch all in all. So keep your eyes peeled. And again, despite the fact that feels like I've already done quite a bit, starting your career at 13 years old is pretty rare. And had I just come out of drama school, I would be my age now and probably have never done one thing. So I am very, very, very much still at the very beginning of this career. I mean, I haven't even transitioned into being able to play adults. I think the oldest character I've played was Billy in season 3 because he just turned 20. So patience, perseverance, and also any other young actors that are listening to this. I still now at 23, even if I hadn't have done anything prior, I feel like my career is just beginning as we speak. I'm getting to an age where I can play a more of a diversity of roles, and I'm so lucky to have already had the experience of, like you mentioned, playing someone like Danny compared to Billy. I also did an episode of Vera where I played one of the lead roles, which was a young kid called Tyler who murdered his own brother in gang-related cold blood, and he was only 15, and he wasn't a suspect for most of the episode, so it was that was really interesting, playing this kind of cunning, deceitful young criminal. I'm just trying to be a sponge every time I'm on a set and taking in everything I can from the actors I'm working underneath or alongside, and just rolling with the punches, and most importantly, absolutely loving every minute of it. Every time I'm working, I feel so fortunate to be able to do my hobby as a job.
Yeah. No, I
That's
think
the
that's
best way. I would do it for free if it wasn't my job. So the fact that it is an absolute blessing. And I think that anyone who is able to make an income through anything that they would do regardless should count themselves extremely lucky.
No, I echo that absolutely, and thank you so much for sharing all of that, and best of luck for all of those projects that we can't name.
Thank you
And
so much.
just one more thing, just really quickly, where can people find you? Where can they keep up to date with all of your progress and going on?
Instagram is my main form of social media. I have to say, I'm in terms of social media, I'm probably a bit more reclusive than your average 20 something. Um, sorry, I just thought I heard someone knock on the door. It's probably a package being delivered. Um, so yeah, Instagram is my main form of social media. My username is Healy, HealyTymd. That's my username on Instagram. Um, I guess that's where you can keep up to tabs with what I'm up to. I mean, annoyingly, my mum's Instagram is also a great place to keep tabs with what her kids are up to. She loves posting about us. But I'm sure yeah, you can pop my Instagram in the description for the podcast, and if anyone wants to give me a follow, keep up to date with what's going on there. And that's sort of it really. I kind of like to, as much as I can, let the work speak for itself. My favorite actors in the world are never on a tabloid. They're never doing a story on the Willem Dafoe's never doing a story on his Instagram, you know. Hey guys, my new skincare. I do feel like it's a little bit of your responsibility as an actor to allow the public to be able to believe you on screen when they see you.
Yeah,
And if you're constantly posting on social media, like, here's me doing this, here's me doing that, it takes away that layer. A great example is Leonardo DiCaprio is one of the most famous actors in the world. However, when he's on screen, you see him as whatever role he's playing. You don't see the celebrity, if that makes any sort of sense.
yeah.
Not that I'm not that I'm trying
You're
to just
comparing
have
yourself to Leonardo DiCaprio.
I'm really not that pretentious, listener. I promise. I promise I'm not.
No, definitely let kayfabe live.
Yeah, exactly.
But no, I just want to say from the bottom of my heart, thank you so much for doing this interview, for everything you do at Alder Hey, for being a great advocate of Hirschsprungs. It's been an absolute honor to have you on.
It's been such a pleasure, Tom. And let me reiterate that thanks to you for all of your exceptional work, because just having this podcast being out there is just it's brilliant. It's just it's absolutely brilliant, and it's essential. And I'm so pleased that I was someone you wanted to have on. And as I said, it was a complete honor. And hey, why don't we do another one of these in the future? Why not?
Would absolutely love to. It would be my pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much, Tom. All right.